I'm Hawka, the Counter-Strike scholar, and I watched back through every major final to figure out if s1mple was the best major MVP of all time. There have been 16 majors throughout CSGO history, and I'm going to be ranking each and every major MVP to see if s1mple's recent performance really was the best of the best. So, I'm not going to waste any more of your valuable time. Let's get into it. We're starting out with number 16, and look, to be a major MVP, you have to have had a great event, but unfortunately for Freiburg at Cologne 2014, he is pretty clearly the worst out of all the major MVP performances. He only put up a 1.14 rating at the event, which put him in 14th place overall out of all the players at this major, and he even is the only major MVP to ever go negative in the grand final. In fact, in that final, he only had a 0.86 rating, so unfortunately, just not quite the star power that a lot of these other players had, but obviously still an impressive performance, and it's a bit weird that NiP got their major a little bit later than the start of CSGO, but I'm glad they got one.
He's going to be walking up, spots Pronex here in the corner, takes him down, turns around for the 180, still 15 bullets left. Freiburg launches it, are you kidding? It's going to be a double, he does it again, and again, and again!
In at number 15, we have Happy from DreamHack Winter 2014. Happy had a 1.17 rating at the event, which put him in 6th place, and he was the best player in the final with a 1.15 rating in that grand final. This is also a slightly awkward one to judge because it's at the same event where Fnatic ended up getting kind of pushed out, or I guess they chose to go out because of the whole Olaf boost situation. The ruling on that was really weird. That was in the quarterfinal though, and eventually Happy and his team went on to win the major. The reason I haven't put Happy much higher is because if you watched his playstyle, he was the cooler for the team, and he was so often the last alive or just away from the rest of the team entirely, which I think got him some easier frags, especially as he was calling for strats and he could kind of try and cut off rotations. And this definitely boosted his T rating a fair bit, although he was also the highest CT rated player on the team. I'm probably a bit biased against his style, so maybe he should be slightly higher than this, but major MVPs are very good, and unfortunately, Happy only comes 15th. In at number 14, we have JW from DreamHack Winter 2013. In a lot of these early events, you could see that the quality of Counter-Strike was much, much lower, and this is also kind of following that trend. By the way, just to show you how bad or low-level CSGO was back at DreamHack Winter 2013, look at this play that JW genuinely made in the major final with the P90 in the second round. He runs out through long, throws a nade while running out through the long doors, peeks long with the P90 into the pistol, ends up dying, and then he is just impressed that someone would ever get this kill against him and says, nice shot. Yeah, that goes to show how much CS has moved on since this time period, but still, JW was definitely a cut above a lot of the other players at this time. JW was the highest rated at the tournament, and he was the highest on his team in the grand final too, and he was an incredibly aggressive player at this time with the AWP.
Well, JW's right down there, Get Right is swooping up at him, and JW wins the duel, and that's one auto sniper lost. He gets a second kill on Freiburg, and the B-bomb side is lost.
I think he was one of the only AWPers that really had the confidence to know how to use the gun properly at this time period. And for JW, you could definitely see his skills shine through in moments. He would have a lot of flashy plays and just had the confidence in his individual ability. And I do think that was good in this era of Counter-Strike where you could take a lot of fights, but it still was quite a hit or miss style. Into number 13, we have Kjaerbye from E-League 2017, and this is one that progressively got lower and lower down my list as I watched back the major finals throughout making this list. Kjaerbye was rated first in the final with a 1.38 rating in the grand final, but only 10th at the event with a 1.21 rating. And overall, his teammate Device was actually higher rated than him for the event, but it's because Kjaerbye did so well in the playoffs and the key moments that he won this MVP. I got the feeling watching the games back that Kjaerbye was a pretty good star player, But honestly, Device was probably the more complete player overall. He just didn't show up as much in the playoffs. And to be fair to Kjaerbye, he had a couple of really big moments in some important rounds throughout those playoffs where I think he did have a lot of impact. But overall, as a player, I don't think he quite cuts it above some of the other players on this list.
Into the 1v1 we go in so little time. Kjaerbye sticking the defuse and he's gonna hit the shot, but he has no time. No way, is he gonna get it in the nick of time? He does! Unreal! Kjaerbye!
Before we continue with the video, I am running a New Year's giveaway for a paracord knife Forest DD Pat, and if you are subscribed, you already have a free entry. Check out the link in the description or the pinned comment to enter. Follow me on a couple of platforms, and that's all you need to do. Go do it, you might win it. Back to the video. Up to number 12, we have Magisk from Katowice 2019. He put up a pretty impressive 1.28 rating at the event, which put him 4th at the event. But he also was only the 4th highest rated player in that grand final. And actually, Device and Zipex were both higher rated than him overall at this major. But Magisk was the highest rated in the playoffs. So again, that's why he won the MVP. This is a slightly strange major because they only had to beat some lower ranked teams in the playoffs because this was that event where ENCE made that crazy run and then they beat MIBR and NIP, who were ranked 11th and 6th respectively. And again, while watching this run, Magisk was a good player, a very good player in a very, very good system. And I rarely felt like he broke out of that system to make some crazy individual plays. But even in the games where he played really well, I wasn't really scared of him at any time while watching the games. It was more just the team play and the positions he was in that worked out. So, yeah, I don't know. I think he did a pretty good job, but I didn't get that fear factor, which is what I'm really looking for in an MVP. Up to number 11, I have AdreN from Krakow 2017. He had a 1.26 rating, which was the 4th highest at the event. And he was only the 5th highest rated in the grand final against Immortals. But I don't think that was the most important game here for Gambit. I think their win against Astralis was much more important for them. And in that series, he did end up top fragging.
For Gambit, Kjaerbye forced into the open, but the smoke will save him just in time, but not in time to get that kill.
The entry frags abound here for Gambit as they march their way in. Another head spotted, another head shot.
I was quite surprised by how much AdreN was entering on this team. I forgot that he was going in first and being really aggressive quite a lot of the time, which is something I give a lot of credit to a player for. I do think he was put in some pretty good spots, and his stats aren't quite as good as maybe some of the other players we've already had. But when watching the game, I think a lot of his kills were big impact. He had a lot of big multi-kills, so I put him slightly higher on this list, and I think my boy AdreN deserves it. This was still one of the craziest major runs. Up to number 10, we have Device from the Face It London Major 2018. Again, only the 3rd highest rated player at the event with a 1.26 rating, and the 3rd highest rated in the final with a 1.25 rating. And this is another awkward one to judge because, again, in this time period, the Astralis system, or moreover, I would say the Astralis team play was probably the real MVP. I still think Device made a few plays outside of that system, though, and had a few big moments, and he did play very well in their closest series, which was against FaZe back in the quarterfinals. At the end of the day, though, it's another tournament where I think all the Astralis players' ratings were boosted slightly because they basically didn't lose any maps. Actually, I think this might have been one of the majors where they literally didn't lose any maps. So Device was solid, but again, MVPs, you're thinking of someone who really grabs the game and completely takes it over, like S1mple. And Device never really had to do that, so it's hard to rate him all that highly.
Gets a free kill. You just don't know. And here he is again. Grenades to follow up as well. 2 players left now between Astralis and the first map, and there goes S1mple as well.
Number 9 goes to the miracle of NACS. My boy Tarik for E-League 2018. This is one that actually slowly rose up my list because Tarik had one of the lower ratings here, Just a 1.22 rating for the event, which is good, but not maybe great as some of these other players. But I think it was his consistency that really shined through for me. He had a really solid rating throughout every single playoff series they had, and they had a lot of tough games here, so I give a lot of credit to Tarik for that. He was only the 8th highest rated player at the event, but he was the 2nd highest rated player in the final, and he was oftentimes going second in for this team behind Stewie, but he also had a few rounds, actually a fair few rounds in the final, where he would even go in first and get some important entry kills. And I think he had so much impact in that final map against FaZe especially. He got a lot of their important kills to get them on the board early, played with real confidence throughout the playoffs, and just that consistency among all the playoff series in a team that were kind of playing super loose. For me, that is something I have to credit him highly for, because this team were relying on individuals, and I think Tarik's individual performance had a huge amount of impact with it. Up to number 8, we have Kenny S from Cluj 2015. He was only the 4th highest rated player at the event, although really he should probably be 2nd because a couple of those players only played a couple of maps. And he was, again, the highest rated player in his grand final with a 1.48 rating in that grand final. In this run, Kenny's team had to beat Fnatic, who were number 2 in the world at the time. Then they had to beat G2, who were ranked number 9. And finally, they were able to 2-0 Na'Vi, who were number 6 in the world, to win it. And he really had a couple of glimpses of moments and games where he would just take over. And I also think Kenny was basically the reason why they were able to win Na'Vi's map pick of Train up against them. He was the only positive player on his team as they won Train 16-14. And he basically single-handedly got them off to like a 7 or 8-0 lead where his AWP was just on fire. And you could see those moments where Kenny was just able to take over rounds by himself, really flashy AWPing at times. Definitely a deserved MVP. Up to number 7, Kjaerbye 2014. I'm giving it to PashaBiceps. His rating was one of the highest here. He had a 1.38 rating at this event and even a 1.49 rating in that grand final. I think the difference you have to account for back in some of these older events, though, is that the way the economy worked at times, or even just the way that teams bought and didn't really save as much, meant that you would have a lot more eco-farming. And when watching it back, it was kind of obvious that was happening to an extent. Maybe not with Pasha more than any other player, but if you're winning games, you're going to get to eco-farm more, which is a really big deal. This was, again, I think, quite an unexpected major for the Poles to win. I believe even after the major, HLTV were only ranking them at number 3. They didn't have their proper ranking system back then. They just had some experts who would make rankings. But still goes to show how much of a surprise this was. Yeah, Pasha was decent, but I think those numbers are overrating how good he was slightly. He was definitely a standout, but those sound like S1mple numbers, and I can tell you from the eye test that Pasha didn't quite play like S1mple at this event. But he was still really good and really explosive on this team. Up to number 6, we have Device from StarLadder Berlin 2019. He had a 1.26 rating at this event and a 1.71 in the final. Not a 1.17, a 1.71, which is crazy high. You have to remember that final was one where they stomped, I think it was a Vanguard they were called at the time. And their biggest series was probably up against Liquid earlier on in the playoffs, who were ranked number 1 at this time period. And again, in that series, Device was the highest rated player. I think at this event, we did see a couple of really massive plays by Device. I don't think it's fair to say that it was fully the Astralis system here that was carrying them through. Device had a couple of really big moments, I remember, from this event. Against Liquid even, he had some important rounds where he came through multi-kills. And I just felt like he had a bit more freedom to actually make individual plays at this event. And he definitely deserves a lot of credit for that. Up to number 5, we have Kjaerbye 2015. Olofmeister, who had a 1.31 rating at the event, the highest throughout, the highest in the final as well with a 1.29 rating, and he was the only positive player for his team Fnatic in that grand final, which always deserves a lot of credit. They were able to beat the number 3 ranked NiP 2-1 in the final, and they were able to beat VP in the semi, who were ranked at number 4. I think that Olof, honestly, in this time period, was having a couple of things in his favor. Firstly, the Tech9 and CZ were so strong in this time period, and Olof was unbelievable with these guns, which meant that even when they were out of money, Olof had the chance to have more impact. And I don't know if I should really take that much away from him for that, because he was just playing in his meta, but I think it is something you have to consider. But secondly, I really got the feeling that Olof was just individually a lot better than other people during this time period, which I think he definitely deserves a lot of credit for. And he also was one of the few players who I felt like truly understood the value of his life. There was a lot of just fighting during this era and a lot of just constantly wanting to take duels, but Olof was always playing pretty intelligently and had that really high skill level. So definitely a worthy addition to the top 5 major MVPs of all time. Up to number 4, though, we have our first Brazilian addition. It is Coldzera from Columbus 2016, his first major win. He was only the 3rd best player in the final, but he had the highest rating at the event with a 1.32. And in that final, he was the highest rated on the close final map of Mirage, which I always give a lot of credit for. It was Na'Vi who they were able to beat 2-0 in that grand final. They also beat Liquid, who themselves had already knocked out the number 1 team Fnatic. And then they were able to beat VP, who were ranked 6th. So 3 really quality wins there in the playoffs. I think if you watch Coldzera in this time period, you know that he kind of just felt inevitable with the kills he was going to get. Pretty passive player, someone who was more towards the back of the pack, but that meant he was just able to figure out where his opponents were positioned and how he was best meant to really tackle that. He does have another major MVP, which we'll get to later, and I think at this major, he was slightly more just playing within the system here at Columbus. I don't think he had that full confidence in himself yet, or that full freedom to really break out at times and make some of those massive plays he was capable of doing. But he was still just so consistent and so ridiculously reliable for this team that the number 4 spot is clearly deserved for him.
Here he comes once again. The first base is AdreN. He's going to hit the ground there as Cold. Oh, what? A jumping double from Cold! What is going on right now? How does he do this?
Number 3 goes to Flusha at Cologne 2015. I have him ranked above Olof here. He had a 1.38 rating at this event and a 1.39 rating in the final, which were both the best. They ended up beating Envy 2-0 in the final, who were only ranked number 6, but were a fairly new lineup and clearly were going to be a very good squad. And then they were also able to beat VP, who were in very good form at this event. The main thing that stood out about Flusha in this time period was, again, this was an era of CS that was much more open, I think, and much more free, and there wasn't as much anti-stratting going on. It was kind of more scrimmy in general, and that meant that Flusha's intuition and his positioning was such an unbelievable edge over any other player. Because no one were really deep diving into demos and figuring out exactly what Flusha was doing all the time, he was just able to outposition people constantly. And he also always had this swagger about him where he would go for jump shots or just go for crazy plays at times. He was so fun to watch during this time period. And while he definitely had a good supporting cast with Crims and Olof there, he was just a really, really high-level player. I don't think anyone was able to touch his intuition for the game at this time, and that is why he deserves his number 3 spot. So we're down to 2 more major MVPs. Honestly, I feel like if you've been keeping up, you might know who's going to be number 1, but we'll start with number 2. will build the tension. Who's it going to be? Okay, just kidding. There's no real tension because we know s1mple's number 1. Number 2 is Coldzera from Cologne 2016. He had a really good event here with a 1.37 rating, a 1.59 in the final, which was obviously the best in both of those categories. And this was also the event where the major seeding system was really weird and we had a Group D group of death, where there were genuinely 3 teams who could have probably made the final of the major that they had to go up against, and they were still able to make sure they made it out of that group. Cold also had a 1.43 rating against the number 2 ranked team at the time, G2, who they had actually just lost to at ECS, but then beat at Pro League. So there was a bit of a back and forth there. That was a really big deal, getting that amazing rating in that one. And I think you could really see here at Cologne 2016 that Cold wasn't just playing within that system anymore. He had a couple of real breakout moments where I could feel that he just had that swagger about him. He just had that full confidence and freedom to make these plays individually. If you didn't watch Coldzera in his peak, I highly recommend you go back and do it because he was just unstoppable. He just always seemed to get his numbers, and I think especially by this time period, he was getting flashy kills too, which was so fun. No more tension though, because we now know who is number 1. It is s1mple from Stockholm 2021. There's just no question. There's just no doubt that this is the best major MVP ever. 1.47 rating at the event, 1.51 rating in the final. Obviously, the best in both categories. In both of those. And it's not like this was even an easy run through a major. It's not like he had easy opponents. In the final, they go up against G2, who were technically ranked number 6, but we know how well Nico was playing at that event, and they actually gave Na'Vi a real good test there in the final. You had the semi against Gambit, who were technically ranked number 4, and whatever you want to say about online play, they were still pretty decent at the major. They still got wins, and they just got absolutely smashed by Na'Vi. And then they had to play Vitality and ZywOo, who were ranked number 3. Clearly, playing against ZywOo, never going to be an easy game. Then back in Swiss, they actually had to play the quote-unquote number 2 ranked team at the time, who apparently were NIP, according to the rankings. And also even had to play Heroic in the best of 1 stage 2, who were ranked number 5. So they basically played all of the top-ranked teams according to the rankings. Maybe you can make an argument that some of those wouldn't be up there if we had had LANs leading up to the major, but still a very tough list of competition. And that's what makes this even more impressive for me from s1mple, is that a lot of these other major MVPs in history have been very good players in their system and will occasionally show flashes of individual brilliance. Whereas s1mple, I feel like goes the opposite and more often shows the flashes of individual brilliance and then occasionally will just play within the system of the team. He is just far and away the best major MVP we have ever had. We should all feel so grateful that we get to watch him play. Also, Nico, if he won the major, I think may have also been the best major MVP ever. Genuinely, he was playing that well on the rifle. We are just incredibly privileged to get to watch the level of Counter-Strike we do today, because watching some of those previous events back, you can see how far it has come, how high the level is now, and even with the level being higher than it has ever been, s1mple is still clearly so far above all these previous major MVPs. It is genuinely such a cool thing to watch. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching. Took me quite a while to watch back through all of these previous majors, so if you enjoyed, I'd appreciate a like. Maybe even a cheeky subscribe, eh? Are you liking that subscribe button? It's looking kind of nice, isn't it? You got to click it right now, and it'll look even nicer. All right, cool. Thank you guys for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll catch you next time. Oh, also, if you want to check out another video, there's another list over here which I did. Not sure which one it's going to be. I'll pick one out, and then YouTube reckons you'll like this video. So maybe it's right. Check it out. All right. See you guys.